They say no train has passed through Blackwater Pass in over 40 years. No tracks, no timetables, nothing but the mountains standing silent. And yet, if you drive that old service road late at night, windows down, engine off, you might hear it. A whistle, hollow, stretching thin through the cold air. Not loud, not threatening, just enough to make your chest tighten, to make your stomach drop. You'll stop and wonder, did you really hear it, or is your mind playing tricks in the dark? Old-timers in the valley will warn you the same way, every time. If you hear the whistle and there are no rails under your feet, they'll say, don't look back. Don't follow the sound. Just keep moving. Because the whistle isn't announcing a train. It's a reckoning, a reminder, a ghost of a choice you made long ago. Blackwater Pass sits high in the Montana Rockies, where winter doesn't want to leave and the wind slices through jackets like knives. Freight lines once ran through here, carrying coal, timber, and men chasing fortunes that the mountains never intended to give. When the rails were abandoned, the town below withered. All that remained were tunnels, rusted signals, and a silence that felt deliberate, as if the mountains themselves were waiting. I first heard the whistle on a night like this. I told myself it was the wind slipping through the old stone cuts. Easier than admitting the sound was calling me by name. And that's when I knew. Choices never truly stay behind. Before we go any deeper, take a moment to leave a comment below. Tell me where you're listening from, and whether you've ever heard anything like this yourself. If you enjoy the story, hit that like button and subscribe, so you don't miss what comes next. Ethan had driven into the Montana Rockies, telling himself it was for the view, a simple weekend escape, a trail or two, some crisp mountain air, and the kind of quiet you can't find in a city that never sleeps. He told anyone who asked at the last gas station before the service road, just clear in my head, nothing serious. And maybe it was true, except for the weight in his chest that wouldn't leave, no matter how many miles he logged. The road narrowed, flanked by pines heavy with frost. He passed the skeletal remains of old signal towers, rusted and leaning as if too tired to stand upright. The air smelled of wet earth and pine resin, a scent both fresh and bitter, like something almost forgotten. Ethan parked outside a small roadside motel. Its paint curled like old newspaper, and a neon sign flickered lazily. A woman behind the desk handed him a key without looking up. People came and went up here all the time, chasing leaves, chasing ghosts, or chasing nothing at all. His phone lit up on the counter with a single voicemail, the name of his mother staring back at him. He didn't answer. He told himself he would wait until the morning. Morning, he repeated in his head, though he knew the word was empty, a placeholder against the gnawing guilt. Ethan laid out his gear in the dim motel room. Boots by the door, pack on a chair. Map folded to the ridge with a blue pass loop ran like a spine along the county line. He had marked a spot, overlook, a place the reviews said was perfect for watching fog roll down the valley in the early morning. Perfect for clearing the mind, perfect for forgetting. The voicemail icon stared at him from the screen. He turned the phone face down. The trailhead welcomed him with cold silence. The service road gave way to dirt and roots. With each step, the hum of the world fell away. No traffic, no neon, no hospital corridors. Only the pines, the wind, and his boots crunching over frost-hardened soil. It should have been peaceful. That's what he had come for. Quiet that wasn't filled with notifications and demands. But something felt off. Birds were absent. Not just quiet, they were gone entirely. The kind of silence that stretched and pressed close and made you question if you'd ever known normal forest sounds at all. He paused, listening. Wind through needles, a distant drip from above. But no birds, no crows, no squirrels, nothing. Just a faint, eerie anticipation of a place waiting for something. He told himself it was the altitude, or maybe sleep deprivation, or just being alone. Logical explanations stacked themselves neatly, a wall against the rising unease. But the tight knot in his stomach refused to loosen. The trail climbed steadily, switchback after switchback, the ridge growing beneath his boots. He checked the map again, not because he needed it, but out of habit. Numbers and lines offered comfort in a world that had stopped making sense. By midday, he reached a small saddle. The trees stood closer here, branches knitting overhead like locked fingers. And in the center, something unnatural. 5 piles of flat stones, knee-high, arranged in a perfect line. No moss, no dirt disturbance around them. Clean, deliberate, out of place. Ethan's city-trained mind tried to rationalize tourist art, local ritual, bored hikers. But as he took a step closer, a metallic taste hit his tongue. Iron. Sharp, cold. His stomach tightened. He looked around. The forest remained indifferent, yet something had changed. Animals, he muttered. Deer, maybe. Coincidence. He left the piles behind and continued toward the overlook. By late afternoon, the fog had begun to roll up from the valleys. It pooled thick in the hollows, rising to meet him level by level. The little blued he had marked for camp lay right at the edge of that basin. He paused. The old man's warning from the gas station echoed. Don't camp where the mist doesn't lift. And if you hear somebody you know calling after dark, you keep walking. Ethan shook it off. Weather, he told himself. Fog, nothing more. But the knot in his stomach only tightened. By the time he reached the campsite, a low shelf jutting from the slope. The fog had reached his waist. He set up his tent quickly, leaving the poles and lines perfectly taut. No fire. The damp air seemed wrong for flames. He ate trail mixed mechanically, staring into the whiteness below the shelf, heart pounding with the unnameable sense that the mountains were watching, waiting. And then from somewhere in the fog, a thud. Heavy, elastic, not a branch breaking, not a rock tumbling. Something landing, coiling, and springing again. Ethan froze. Another thud. Closer this time. The rhythm slow, deliberate, unnerving. Pause. Thump. Pause. Thump. And then the unmistakable whisper of a name. Ethan. He bolted upright, hand on the zipper. But the fog gave no answer. Only silence, thick and oppressive. It had begun. Night fell faster than Ethan expected. The fog thickened, climbing up the slope in slow, patient waves, swallowing the forest around him. The valley below was no longer visible. The overlook, once a bright goal, had disappeared into white nothingness. He sat his tent, legs drawn up, fingers gripping the sleeping bag. Each small noise, the wind rattling pine needles, the faint creak of his pack, felt amplified. His breaths came shallow and fast, a rhythm he could almost hear over the pounding in his chest. Then came a sound, a long, low whistle carried through the fog, impossibly distant yet undeniably close. At first, he thought it was the wind in the valley, bending through the ridges. But the tone was too deliberate, too mournful, curling around the trees like a living thing. Ethan froze. Memories unbidden surged in his mind. The choice he had made years ago, betraying a friend to save his own career. The promotion he had earned at the expense of loyalty. The long nights replaying the guilt in quiet moments, convincing himself that what was done was done. The whistle sounded again, closer this time, almost as if it had felt his reflection in the frost and moved toward him. He gripped the zipper of his tent, forcing calm into his shaking hands. It's just the mountains. Steel and wind. There's a train somewhere. Tracks, maybe old ones. He told himself. Rational, safe explanations. But the sound came again, bending around him, circling the tent, rising and falling like a heartbeat he could not escape. It was then that Ethan noticed the frost along the edges of his tent. Something had pressed there, soft at first, then heavy. No footprints, no marks, just the impression of weight where none should be. He remembered the old man's warning from the roadside. Don't answer if someone calls you from the dark. Ethan's fingers hovered over his phone. The voicemail icon blinked patiently. He tried to ignore it, but the memory of his mother's voice pulled him like gravity. He knew he had made mistakes. He had waited, put off the calls, convinced himself he was busy, convinced himself tomorrow would be better. But tomorrow had never come before her hospital stay. The whistle rose again, and now he could hear it echoing off unseen cliffs. The sound was unnatural, bending in ways wind could not. His stomach dropped. Something in the rhythm was mocking him, circling him. Every note, every rise and fall, seemed to emphasize the choices he had buried deep inside. Ethan's gaze fell outside the tent, toward the fog that had reached his chest. The faint outline of stones caught his eye. 5, neatly stacked again, knee-high, arranged in a line he hadn't noticed before. Clean, deliberate, watching. Animals, he muttered again, but the word rang hollow. The thud that followed proved otherwise. Something heavy landed nearby. Pause. Another thud. A rhythm forming, slow and precise, almost like a heartbeat, his own, reflected and magnified in the mist. The whistle changed pitch, shorter now, sharper, almost like a call, testing him. A name whispered through the fog. Ethan. He froze, every instinct screaming to run, to hide, to deny what he had heard. But the fog pressed against him, patient, knowing, deliberate. His guilt weighed on him, made heavier by the unnatural clarity of the sound. The whistle wasn't just noise, it was a reckoning. He thought of the friend he had betrayed, the trust he had stolen, the words he had left unsaid, the apologies never made. Each choice etched in invisible ink into the landscape around him, now manifesting as something alive, something that knew him better than he knew himself. Ethan unzipped the tent slightly, peering into the fog. The outlines of more stone piles formed a perimeter around his small shelf. He could barely see them through the mist, but he could feel their intent. The rhythm of the thuds matched his heartbeat, or maybe his heartbeat had slowed to match them. A longer, louder whistle now, bending across the valley, carried a sense of purpose. Not a train, not wind, not an accident. It was deliberate, methodical. The whistle spoke, and every note echoed a memory, a choice, a sin he had ignored. Ethan staggered back into the tent. He tried to convince himself it was a hallucination, sleep deprivation, isolation, stress. But the thuds followed. Pause, thump, pause, thump. The rhythm moved around the tent, as if circling, calculating. His mind raced. Could he leave? Go down the slope into the fog? The trail was invisible now, swallowed by the white, by the sound, by the weight of the past. Every direction seemed wrong. Every step seemed observed. He remembered the stories, old Montana legends about the Blackwater Pass, about the train that comes for those who betray, those who cheat, those who ignore the voices that call from the dark. And now, it seemed, the legends had found him. The whistle cut, high and sudden, close enough to make him wince. And then silence, tense, complete, waiting. Ethan's decision had to be made. Stay and confront whatever haunted the ridge, or retreat blindly into the fog, hoping to outrun a guilt he had carried too long. The mountains held their breath. The whistle waited. Ethan's eyes snapped open to a silence that felt alive. The fog had thinned slightly, revealing the outlines of pines and the edge of the shelf, but the valley remained a white void. His sleeping bag was damp with condensation, his hands stiff from gripping the fabric all night. He forced himself upright, boots crunching softly on the needles outside the tent. The cold seeped into his bones, but he ignored it. He had to see, had to confirm that the thuds and the whistle from last night hadn't been his imagination. The stone piles remained. 5, perfectly aligned, still unmarked by the weather. Moss beneath each pile looked undisturbed, too deliberate. His stomach twisted. Something had been here overnight. Something had circled him. The whistle returned, faint this time, carried on a breeze that seemed to know him personally. Each note curled through the trees, bending around trunks, sliding along the slope. He couldn't place its origin, yet the sound felt intimate, like it had memorized the way he breathed, the weight of his choices. Ethan took a deep breath, telling himself it was just a train from some forgotten track. Historical railways crisscrossed Montana once. Remnants remained in the mountains. But the whistle had no tracks to follow, no rails, no engine, and the rhythm, the precision, was impossibly human, or impossibly something else. He stepped closer to the piles. The ground beneath his boots pressed with each step, and he noticed something new, shallow depressions forming perfect cloven shapes in the soft moss. Hooves? No animal this size moved with such methodical intent. Another whistle, this one louder, sharper. It sliced the morning quiet, bending the air in unnatural ways. Ethan's chest tightened. His internal guilt, long buried beneath rationalizations and distractions, began to feel like a physical weight pressing down. Memories flooded back. The promotion he had earned at the expense of his friend, the silences he had maintained, the moments of avoidance, the excuses. Every betrayal echoed through the whistle. Every lie, every selfish decision seemed to animate the ridge. A long, low thud vibrated the ground beneath his feet. Pause. Another thud, closer. The rhythm began to circle him again, slower this time, deliberate. He realized with a jolt that the sounds matched his heartbeat, or had he slowed to match them? Ethan stumbled back, glancing over the edge of the shelf. Fog still blanketed the valley, but there, shifting slightly in the white, a shape distorted just beyond clarity. Horns, cloven feet, a dark silhouette that moved in unnatural, coiling patterns. He froze, every instinct screaming. The figure didn't rush. It didn't charge. It simply observed, bouncing from one spot to another with a rhythm that seemed to mock him. The whistle, now closer, called his name, Ethan. The weight of years pressed down. This wasn't about a train. It wasn't about wind. It was about him, the choices he had made, the trust he had broken. And the creature, whatever it was, knew. Ethan's legs shook as he retreated to the tent, fumbling with the zipper. The whistle stopped for a heartbeat, then returned, closer. He pressed his back against the canvas, heart hammering. Pause. Thump. Pause. Thump. The sound circled the tent, invisible but precise, measuring, judging. He thought of the old Montana legend, a train without tracks, a whistle for the guilty, an entity that punished those who betrayed their own conscience. He had laughed at it once, in the safety of his city life. But now, the mountain had delivered him into its story. A metallic taste slid across his tongue. He realized he hadn't eaten since noon the day before. Hunger, fatigue, fear, they combined into a clarity that made his previous rationalizations crumble. The entity, or the whistle itself, was real, patient, and aware of every detail of his past. He grabbed his phone. One bar of signal flickered. A voicemail from his mother blinked, waiting. He pressed play, though his hand shook. Her voice, calm and warm, told him everything was fine at the hospital. Just routine. Nothing serious. She just wanted to hear his voice. Relief washed through him, quick, sharp and guilty. He had feared the worst. And yet the thuds persisted, circling, measuring, judging. The whistle returned, bending around the slope like smoke, calling him back to himself, to the choices he had avoided acknowledging. Ethan forced himself up. He needed to move. The shelf offered no safety. The mist below seemed to wait. Every instinct screamed to descend, to escape the ridge. But the path was gone. The trail he had followed yesterday vanished into laurel thickets, replaced by unfamiliar brush and stones. He stumbled into another clearing, heart hammering. 7 new stone piles formed a half circle, their moss pressed flat, a single flat rock atop the center catching the weak sunlight. The words etched into it, shallow but deliberate, made him choke. Answer when called. Not graffiti, not a prank. His mother's handwriting. The loops, the angles exact. His stomach dropped. The whistle carried again, now closer, punctuating the command. The fog rippled around the piles, alive, patient, waiting. Ethan bolted. He plunged into the laurel, branches scratching his arms, roots tripping his boots. Behind him, thuds followed, unrelenting. Pause. Thump. Pause. Thump. Always circling, always precise. The valley remained shrouded in white. The overlook was gone. Trails were gone. Only the stones, the whistle, and the echo of his own guilt remained. He ran until exhaustion forced him to a halt beside a shallow creek. Pebbles slicked beneath his feet. The sound finally receded, leaving a silence that pressed against him like ice. His breath came in ragged gasps. Every memory, every regret weighed down on him. Ethan sank against a boulder, wet, cold, and trembling. The whistle faded into the distance, leaving only the soft, irregular thump of the earth beneath him. A heartbeat that was not his own. Night fell like a curtain pulled across the ridge. Fog rolled back in, heavier now, blanketing the valley in white silence. Ethan's teeth chattered as he packed the last of his wet gear, unsure whether to descend along the creek or press on through the thickets. Every instinct screamed caution, but the stone piles and the words carved into the flat rock, answer when called, seared themselves into his mind. He chose the trail upward, toward a narrower spur that the topo map suggested would connect back to the main loop. Branches snagged his sleeves and roots threatened every step, but something deeper than the terrain compelled him forward. The whistle returned, louder this time, bending around trunks, rising in pitch and then falling into a low, guttural wail. It wasn't just a sound, it was accusation, a memory pressed into the air. Each note dredged up a choice he had made. The promotion he accepted instead of helping his friend, the canceled holidays, the calls he ignored. His chest tightened, every regret amplified. Then came the thuds. Slow, deliberate, circling. Unlike before, they were closer, heavier, measured. Pause. Thump. Pause. Thump. Each impact pressed into the earth, resonating through his bones. The forest seemed to fold around the rhythm, guiding it. Ethan realized the train wasn't coming to him. It was walking through him, carrying every misstep, every lie he'd told himself. He stumbled into another clearing. Moonlight barely penetrated the fog, revealing a new arrangement of stones. 10 now, forming a larger circle. Moss flattened into perfect shapes as if something massive had rested there repeatedly. In the center, the flat stone reflected moonlight like a mirror. The words, etched deep into its surface, made him stumble back. You came late. His heart froze. Relief from this morning's voicemail twisted into guilt so sharp it cut like glass. He had delayed. He had ignored. The mountain and the legend were not forgiving the consequences. They were delivering them. The whistle shrieked again, then fell silent. Ethan waited, tense. Nothing. Then the thuds returned, closer, faster, impossibly precise. They circled the clearing, surrounding him. He spun, searching for the source. Fog hid everything. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the ground. A low, coiling figure emerged from the mist. Not fully formed, but recognizable. Horns scraping the trees, cloven feet pressing into the moss, limbs bending in impossible angles. Its presence carried weight, gravity, and malice. And in the black void where its eyes should have been, he saw himself. Every lie, every missed call, every choice he had evaded. You left me alone, a voice whispered through the fog. Not human, not entirely his mother's, yet familiar. The words wrapped around him like chains. The whistle echoed each syllable. Pause. Thump. Pause. Thump. Ethan fell to his knees, shaking. I didn't know, he stammered. But the entity didn't respond to excuses. It bounced, testing, measuring, teaching. Each landing pressed his memories into the earth, his guilt made visible in the stones and moss. A single bounce, high and slow, carried the figure across the clearing. Gravel scattered, the sound hollow, reverberating in the mist. It landed just feet from him, horns scraping the edge of the circle. The voids of its eyes consumed him, replaying moments he had buried deep, birthdays ignored, promises unkept, final calls unanswered. Ethan cried, collapsing onto the moss. I tried. I would have if I had known. His voice was swallowed by the fog. The thuds circled again, slower this time, as if waiting for acknowledgement. A cold gust swept through the clearing. The entity paused. For a heartbeat, silence. Then a single bounce, soft but final. The words etched in the stone echoed in the air, judged. The fog began to thin, the thuds fading into distant echoes. Ethan lay on the ground, soaked, shivering, every muscle trembling. The stones remained, the flat rock gleaming in the moonlight, silent witnesses to his reckoning. He understood now. The legend had not been about punishment alone. It had been about recognition, facing the truth of one's own failures, no matter how long they had been ignored. Dawn crept over the ridges. Ethan staggered to his feet, the forest quiet. The trail was visible again, but he knew he could not simply walk away. The stones, the whistle, the bouncing presence, it would remain, waiting for the next soul unwilling to answer when called. He descended carefully, each step deliberate, carrying the weight of lessons pressed into his very bones. Behind him, the valley returned to normal, or as normal as a place steeped in such stories could be. The whistle was gone. The thuds were gone. But the memory of the judgment would linger, a constant reminder that the mountains don't just hide secrets, they keep score. Morning came slowly, pale and hesitant, seeping through the fog like thin watercolors across the ridges. Ethan remained on the trail, every step heavier than the last. His muscles ached, not just from climbing or slipping through wet underbrush, but from the weight of the night's reckoning pressing into his chest. The forest seemed normal now, but he knew better. The stones, the thuds, the hollow eyes. These were not illusions born of exhaustion. They were truths carved deep into the world. He followed the creek downstream, tracing its path through moss-covered rocks and fallen pines. Each ripple reminded him of the echoes of the thuds, of the rhythmic bouncing that had measured his guilt, and of the voice that was both familiar and alien. The water glimmered in the weak sunlight, and yet the sense of being watched never left him. Every shadow seemed to twitch. Every breeze carried a hint of the hollow whisper, "Answer when called." Hours passed, though time felt fractured. Sunlight grew stronger, warming the damp earth, but Ethan moved mechanically, eyes scanning constantly for the next set of stone piles. And they came, one clearing after another, each with perfectly stacked rocks, flattened moss, impressions of hooves pressed into the soil. The formations were always deliberate, precise, almost ceremonial. He realized the entity wasn't chasing him to harm, but to teach, to imprint upon him the consequences of negligence, avoidance, and procrastination in life. By late afternoon, exhaustion forced him to stop at a sheltered bend of the creek. He collapsed onto a patch of moss, wet and muddy, and let the silence of the forest press around him. His thoughts turned inward, spiraling over the missed calls, the ignored messages, the delays, the excuses. The voice of the legend, the echo of the whistle, and the heavy bouncing had shown him, in ways no human could, the weight of choices deferred and responsibilities unfulfilled. He realized, slowly, that this judgment was not a punishment from some malevolent being. It was an awakening. The mountains, the legend, the bouncing demon, whatever shape it had taken, had forced him to confront what he had refused to face for years. Regret alone was not enough. Recognition and action were required. The forest began to shift subtly. Sunlight broke through the canopy in thin beams, revealing the path more clearly. Ethan stood, soaked and bruised, and followed it downstream. The stones and moss formations disappeared gradually, as if the forest itself was letting him return, but not without leaving reminders. He touched one small cairn, fingers tracing the flattened moss, and whispered, "I understand." The reply came only in silence, but it was enough. By evening, he emerged onto the main trail, familiar and marked. The sights and sounds of the world outside the ridges returned. Birds calling, the rustle of small animals, distant whined through the trees. But Ethan knew he had changed. The ordinary beauty of the forest felt layered now with the weight of lessons learned. The mountains weren't just scenery. They were keepers of consequences, silent witnesses, patient judges. At the trailhead, the old man from the bar appeared as if conjured by memory. He tipped his worn cap. "Looks like you made it back," he said. There was no judgment in his eyes, only recognition. The mountains always keep score. Ethan nodded, words failing him. His phone buzzed. A signal. Messages and missed calls flooded in, each one a reminder of choices still waiting to be made. This time he answered. He spoke to family, to friends, to those he had neglected. Words that had been delayed for years flowed freely, heavy with apology, honesty, and commitment. Night fell again, peaceful this time. The trailhead emptied. Ethan set up camp one last time under the stars, careful to avoid any mist-filled hollows. He lit a small fire, its warmth reassuring. And as he lay back, staring up at the sky, he heard nothing. No whistles, no thuds, no hollow echoes. Only the wind, gentle and approving. The mountains had not forgotten, and neither would he. The legend of the bouncing demon, the judgment of the ridge, had done its work. It had reminded him that avoidance, neglect, and unanswered calls do not disappear. They accumulate, and some force, somewhere, will eventually demand acknowledgement. Ethan closed his eyes, the night silent and watchful. He had survived, yes, but he was changed. The forest, the stones, the rhythm of the bouncing. These were not mere stories. They were warnings, etched into the mind as deeply as they were into the land. He drifted to sleep under the quiet stars, ready, for the first time in years, to answer when called.